Released after the remake of the second Resident Evil is the Resident Evil 3 remake that we are all familiar with. Back in 1999, the third game in the franchise was released, owning the name of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, leaning towards action relatively more than the previous two games by expanding the lore of the Raccoon City incident even more. Jill has to escape the city in time as the stalker Nemesis pursues her. Along the way, she meets new people that help her out along the way. She solves the puzzles scattered around, slowly making her way to the extraction point, and finally managing to finish Nemesis off. Roughly 20 years later, we were introduced to the third remake of the original Resident Evil, along Resident Evil 1 and 2 remakes, Resident Evil 3 Remake. But this time, not including the word Nemesis, but the third remake seems to haven't been acceptable to the majority of the fans. In this video, we'll be talking about Resident Evil 3 Remake and the problem with it. So if you enjoy Resident Evil content like this, then make sure to subscribe. Now let's get into the video. Following the tradition of the recent remakes, Resident Evil 3 Remake starts in a more relaxed way, explaining what happened a bit before the original game's beginning by teaching the player base mechanics. Jill is having hallucinations, most probably because of the mansion incident. She receives a call from Brad, warning her to stay alert before she is ambushed by a tall figure. After a frustrating chase, Jill manages to meet Brad in the streets as people are running for their lives. So far so good, but as we go on and we dive deeper into the game, you would realize that this is far from being the beloved Resident Evil 3. The first problem is the Nemesis. His overall look is distinguishable as Nemesis, but he is too far from being what we expected, as he lets Jill live where he could kill Jill like in a blink of an eye, just like he kills others. But Jill is always saved by the plot armor. Remember when you encountered Nemesis in the original? He used to run towards Jill furiously, just like it was his mission to finish off STARS. But now the only thing that the remade Nemesis is carrying from the original is the word STARS and his equipment. He's changed a lot. For instance, he mutates into animal form, rather his arm getting mutated and growing tentacles. His encounters are pretty straightforward, as there is no way to replay the encounters, as the remake has cut all the possible choices you could have affecting the lore and the story progression. He is definitely taller, but for sure not as scary, as the boss fight encounters feel more like a Dark Souls / turn-based fight, especially the fight near the square and the clock tower. And the final fight, it is a mess. It is totally a different thing, as you have to finish Nemesis off shooting a rechargeable weapon that is left in that lab for whatever reason. Unfortunately, Nemesis isn't the only downside of the game. The Raccoon City isn't what we are familiar with, except for two places that are fairly remade and a door. The places that you play in are not familiar at all. The part where you solve the electricity puzzle, train station, the lab, the RPD, the hospital, everything is new, except for some familiar places here and there. Overall, there is nothing to be felt for nostalgia. Moving on to the puzzles. The few roughly mind-twisting puzzles were another downside, as there isn't much puzzles available to even be talking about. See for yourself, the train station puzzle was the biggest puzzle in the game, that the solution to it is easily figured out after a couple of tries. Some of the puzzles are here from the 90s Resident Evil 3 too, like the gem puzzle, but it is mostly skipped due to it being not important puzzle because it is totally skippable. That was almost all of the puzzles that made to the game. It is really disappointing to say that most of the puzzles aren't here, like the music puzzle in the tower, the puzzle in the final lab, and even the gem puzzle. This lack of puzzles not only makes the game less interactive, but also makes it feel way shorter. I remember finishing the OG Resident Evil 3 the first time, like 5 hours and a half, but I managed to finish Resident Evil 3 Remake in 3 hours and a half. I looted everything and visited every possible area that you could think of. See, 2 hours is a lot for a game that is already reputed as short. Cutting puzzles out will make the game simply shorter by not needing to go back and forth to find keys. The clock tower was another part that was totally cut. Like the entire thing. Clock Tower used to be where you would once more face Nemesis and solve puzzles, encounter spiders, and most importantly, play as Carlos. Everything that I just told you was cut, and the fight was reduced to a simple Dark Souls fashion boss fight with Nemesis that could be simply defeated if well dodged. Another huge portion of the game that was mostly cut was the sewers, where you would fight the, let's say, sewers boss. Back in the days, it was a really tough thing to get that part done and escape out of that area without losing a lot of health. Just a quick reminder, if you have come so far and are actually enjoying, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, because we are trying to regrow our channel as the first one got suspended. And if you are a Resident Evil fan, I'm pretty sure you're gonna enjoy the upcoming content. So please subscribe. Now let's move on. Another part that was totally changed was the hospital part, where you would play as Carlos to find the cure for Jill. This part was completely changed, and yes, there was a lot of going back and forth in here, and you would face hunters here, just like the original. And the process of finding the serum itself was a bit changed, but the biggest change in the hospital segment was the last part, where you have to kill all the zombies by yourself as Carlos, which definitely feels not Resident Evil, somewhat Dead Rising. Let me know what you think about it down in the comment section. Mercenaries, the game mode that was firstly introduced in Resident Evil 3, is not available here. I have no idea why would they do such thing. The Mercenaries was a pretty fun experience even with the limitations back in the days. With the release of the new RE games, we were presented with more of Mercenaries like Resident Evil 4, 5, 6, and now 8. The remake of the game that firstly came up with the idea of Mercenaries has decided to cut the Mercenaries game mode entirely out. Instead, Resident Evil Resistance is what we get. A certainly not polished game with huge issues, such as server and matchmaking and replayability. This is the game mode where you would spend a lot of time in the lobby just to join a match, instead of replaying it over and over. It was a big disappointment, unfortunately. Overall, Resident Evil 3 would have been a great game if it was a standalone spin-off of Resident Evil 3, where you would play as a totally different character, cause it certainly is not Resident Evil 3. But let's now talk about the goods. Well, obviously the game looks insane, and the attention to the details and animations and trying to make them as realistic as possible is crazy and respectable. The game performs well and smooth even on low-end PC builds, thanks to the newly designed RE engine. The variety of the weapons provided in this game, plus the attachments, makes the game a little bit more replayable. The overall gameplay and dodge mechanic is crazy, and the item shop menu will help replaying this game a little bit. So that'll do it for Resident Evil 3 Remake, the remake of the original Resident Evil 3 that was released back in 1999, but was certainly not acceptable to majority of the fans. Let me know what you think about this game. Did you have fun playing this game? How do you criticize this game? Let me know your thoughts down in the description. And if you have come so far and enjoyed this video, then please make sure to subscribe to the channel, as we're trying to regrow the channel. I'm a Raccoon series survivor, and as always, thanks for watching.